Warning, this video may contain spoilers for late parts in the game. If you plan on playing this at some point, turn back now. You have been warned. CR again with a review that I'm honestly dreading a bit. First thing I do have to say is if you like this game and it's your favorite or otherwise, you aren't going to like my review, and this will be my first review that I honestly didn't like the game, starting about 45% of the way through, and forced myself to continue. I'll leave talking about the reasons to my cons section further on, but there were definitely aspects of the game that I did like overall, so it's a little good and a little bad, but I really don't ever see myself coming back to play this game, and hope that the new one that's coming out is a lot better than this. Though I'm not sure, as I was told that this game was better than the original, and while there are some quality of life changes, the rest, I feel, doesn't make up for it. I also read in some article that this game is crazy easy, and I don't know what kind of acid this person dropped to make the game easier, unless they conveniently left out the fact they were playing on the easiest difficulty, but I played on normal mode and still struggled, to the point where I felt like a kid yelling at the screen for every small mistake I did or bullshit the game threw at me. This is definitely through lack of skill, but I just didn't have fun with it. Alright, let's move to the basics. So, if you haven't seen my review on the first game that came out earlier this week, then I'll explain again. This game has you play as, at least starting out, a man named Grave who dual wields guns. Your main forms of attack are these guns, which have 3 different ways to shoot. Standing in place, which is good in some situation, but mostly gets you killed. By locking on, which you think would be the better option, but locking on in this game is absolutely fucking awful and programmed weirdly, but I'll talk about that later. And finally, by holding the shoot button, which charges the bullet and somehow makes it stronger. You also have a whole arsenal of special attacks that you can earn throughout the duration of the game, there being 9, which I actually didn't unlock all of them by the end of the game, because at the end of every stage there's a ranking system for how well you did, and from the GameFAQs guide they said that if you die, you should just start the level over because you risk not getting enough points to unlock special moves, but absolutely fuck that, because starting on stage 3, I honestly think there's no way you're not gonna die, at least your first time playing through, because of everything that's going on. Then you have a melee attack that doubles as a parry for incoming missiles. There's also a dodge button that comes in handy as you can shoot during all the forms of dodges, but half the time it doesn't fucking work, just seemingly at random, and again I'll explain more on this later. The final thing you can do is plant your melee coffin down on the ground, which acts as a shield, but you can't move during this or do anything helpful, so I don't even know why the fuck they put this in the game. There are 2 additional characters you can unlock throughout the duration of the game, but I honestly had no interest in replaying the game 2 more times at that point, so I have no clue if they have different story to uncover, but they are a companion throughout the main story, so I don't believe so. The quality of life things I mentioned before are literally just that they changed some of the button placements and how you go about changing which special move you do, being that instead of having to pause the game, you use the D-pad to change it whenever you like. The game picks up 3 years after the last, with Miko waking up Grave from death and introducing him to her new assistant, Spike, who she met when she was researching about a problem. Apparently he made a seed seeker, which seed is a drug that was introduced and seemingly destroyed in the first game. The crew want to stop the spread of this dangerous drug, as it is not widely known to transform users into monsters or otherwise kill them. They eventually come upon a place filled with seed, Grave killing the head guy and finding that they aren't the only ones looking into the drug problem. They meet Billy and Cabane, 2 dead men like Grave who want to stop the problem as much as the team does, deciding to join them as they have similar goals. Cabane mentions he doesn't like Spike right off the bat, saying he smells strange. They travel to a couple different places looking for a cynic boss to give them some extra information on where they can go to get to the root of the problem, eventually coming upon a casino manager, defeating him and forcing him to give up some vital info. He says to go to a castle in Chinatown to meet someone named Richard Wong. Cabane tries to kill him, but everyone starts arguing about killing not being how they do things, though that's how they did it in the first game, and the manager escapes. They meet up with Wong and he agrees to help them as they also have common interest of wanting the drugs to go away. He tells them that the Corcione family on the Metaslica Peninsula made it. They get an information disc from a man named Guido who is subsequently killed by Corcione's army. They learned about Don Corcione as well as his adopted son, Garino, who Kabani had his sights set on. Kabani tells Billy that he has a seeking suspicion that there's a rat amongst them due to always being caught by the Corcione family everywhere they go. They get to Don's mansion but are given the slip as they are forced to fight the casino manager, who is transformed by Seed. The gang locates the Seed production facility and infiltrate it, coming upon the combined and mutated bodies of Bob, Lee, and Walken from the first game, Grave finally putting them out of their misery. As they leave the facility, they are met by Garino and another man who fatally shoots Grave. They take him to safety as Garino escapes. Kabani tells them that the person who was able to wound Grave was another dead man named Fangaram, who was the third weapon of Grave's set, all three together being named the Cerberus. Grave carries the right and left, while Fangaram carries the center. Kabani finally reveals his past, that he was once in the military but died. Upon waking up, he was being experimented on cruelly by Garino, learning that he was now a dead man. Garino injected him with the experimental seed, which killed him a second time. A meditation practice saved him, though left him half dead man and half seed. At any point, he could die if he doesn't keep his meditation up. Grave gets a blood transfusion while this happens, and almost dies for a third time, but through sheer force of will to complete his mission, he recovers. They head to the last known hideout of Don Corcione and begin one of their final assaults. The leader of the Corcione family, Zell, fights back, but is no match for Grave, and Zell actually retreats, saying he's gonna go on vacation. They find that Corcione's cargo plane is getting ready to take off and chase after it, meeting Bunji, Grave's disciple from the first game, who is now a dead man, with Grave maybe, finally, this time, probably putting the people from the first game down. Reaching the cargo plane, Grave murders everyone, reaching a girl named Sherry, who is Bear Walken's daughter and wife to Harry McDowell. Grave, having killed both in the first game she wants revenge for, and doesn't get it, dying the same as everyone else. Grave eventually reaches the front of the plane where he sees Don Corcione's own son betray him through a hologram, having his men inject him with seed and turning him into a monster. Grave kills him and the plane explodes, with Grave somehow surviving. He gets back to the truck base and sees it in shambles with everyone heavily injured. They say that Spike had betrayed them because Fangaram came and shot everyone except him. He left, but not before injecting Nika with seed, being the only thing that saved her from death. They receive his coordinates and follow it, gearing up for the final battle. They re-enter the seed factory and find a different route this time, coming in contact with Spike, who explains everything. He turns out to be a clone of Garino who was experimented on, eventually running away and coming up with a plan to have Grave kill Garino, and I guess everyone is just cool with it, heading further in the factory. Fangaram fights Grave and says it's due to the fact that Grave killed his friends, and Grave brutally murders him. Finally arriving at the last bit of the factory, Garino greets them and explains everything. The weird place they are in now is a spaceship from a long-forgotten civilization, and that the seed and crazy necrolization that had created Deadman had all come from it. Garino says that he did all this essentially due to boredom, as he was rich from the beginning of his life, eventually being able to create life of his own, and to him, becoming a god in his own way. He was actually able to come in contact with the aliens, who would allow him to travel in space if he flooded the world with seed, the aliens wanting to infiltrate the planet. He kills Spike with some weird superpowers, and Grave goes Super Saiyan, destroying the alien technology. Garino teleports him to another realm, and Grave puts him down for good. The alien craft begins to crumble, and Garino gives Mika a prototype counter-seed serum so she can survive, calling everything that happened entertaining before finally dying. A while later, Kabane and Billy part ways with the group and fade into the sunset. Due to my intro and basics, you'll probably understand that I don't have that many good things to say about this game, but it does share some of the things that I thought were good in the first game. The story is still interesting and was one of the only things that kept me going, besides the soundtrack, which is just as phenomenal as the first. The only enemies I partially liked were the bosses, because for most of them, there aren't 1,000 enemies also shooting you at the same time. The characters are nice as well, and this game added a bit more character to them, if you get what I'm saying, because most of the time the main characters are just stoic or worried in the first game, and this one added Cabane, Billy, and Spike, which added some laughs to the seriousness, but that's about it on my pros side. So one of the things that I mentioned that was nice but bare bones from the first game was the gameplay. And while exactly the same in this, except a few button changes, it's somehow worse with the addition of some enemies and the amount of enemies plus how everything is set up. This game likes to put you in a small square room with enemies just spawning everywhere around you, and suffice it to say, this is fucking annoying, especially due to the fact that the main character isn't built around it. Don't get me wrong, it's doable as I beat the game, but it's not fun to play like the first game. There's a part in the last level that they add fucking platforming, and it's the goddamn worst, because the rest of the game isn't built around it, with the platforming needing to be super precise. I'd also like to mention two things about this. One is that there is a jump button, being the dodge button, but you can only jump up and not forward, so the way you actually platform is by using your dodge right before you fall off, which is ass. Two is that the platforms have infinitely spawning enemies, so if you fall off a platform where you just killed the enemies, when you get back to the platform, they spawn again, and there are also infinitely spawning enemies on the ground that explode, knocking you down every 5 seconds as you try to get back to the platforming. Now, let me talk about how ass dodging is in this game. I couldn't really tell if this game gives you invincibility frames for dodging, but that's not my issue with it. It's the fact that when the dodge animation ends, you get stuck in it for a second before you can move again, which is just enough time for most enemies to blast you again, knocking you down in frustration, which I believe knockdown is how I spent like 5% of this game. Now, let me talk about how ass the missiles that get sent at you are. Basically, in the first game, missile enemies were generally used sparingly, and you can parry them back. In this game, you can still parry them, but there's so many missile enemies, and they give some new attack where they shoot like 8 at you at once, and it's usually when you're in a small square room, so you're forced to focus on them. But if there's more than one, may some god save your soul, because you're most likely getting hit. Pair this with big enemies that use a shockwave attack, causing you to get paralyzed for like 5 seconds, and you're 100% getting hit by a missile, and your shield is being torn to shreds by all the other enemies. Also, the lock-on function is pretty god-awful, and it seems to act on its own free will half the time, desyncing from enemies at random, and is most frustrating with bosses, where it's seemingly necessary, especially if you want to use the rockets to hit them, because they don't auto-aim. By the end of the game, I just didn't care anymore, so there's no extra section. I didn't lock anything either besides the extra characters, so oops. I really wanted to like this series as some hidden gems, but at least for me, I won't be coming back to play these games. Maybe the first one, but that's a hard maybe. I can't even fathom playing higher than normal difficulty, and in the second game, at least, there's a difficulty higher than that, which I could only fucking assume is for hardcore masochists, or people who get frustration out by yelling at video games, which I actually did resort to yelling a few times because that's how frustrated I got on normal difficulty. Despite saying all this, I'm usually one to say give something a try before you take someone else's word on it, because I like Sonic and many people don't like that series, so I'd say give this a once over if you think that the game looks good at all to you. Hope you enjoyed my misery, and see you next video.